Hello, my friendos. Hello, my friendos. Got the sound doubled up. That's not what we wanted. There we go. Oh, boy. So V and I were just talking. What's going on, that boy Nate? Just you, bro. Just you. How you been, man? V and I were just talking a few minutes ago, sitting with Rathmore and in, hold on. Okay. Yeah, Cheryl, V did it. So thank her. V is awesome. Just talking with her and Rathmore, and they were doing some music and stuff. And I'm like, all right, hey, what's going on, Big Jim Slade? Dude, you guys got all the sick? I thought you were, God, you're fucking, oh, Jim. Ugh. Yeah, that's all I got for you. That's all I got. Yeah, so you're not going anywhere, are you? You're fucked. I'm gonna go hang out with some friends. No, I'm fucked. I was just hanging out with V, and I said, I'll go live real quick. And I have up here in this corner, you can see the shadow cast by it. I have an Elgato Key Light Mini, which I love, by the way. And it connects the Saguaro. Where is it? Oh, let me move out of my own way. There it is. There is the cactus. Now, where is the dog? Had to go outside again. Gotta go outside. I said, I'll go stream. So I pull up Streamlabs. I click on my power for my Elgato light. No, I can't find it because it connects through Wi-Fi. And in order to get it to connect, you have to connect it to the 2.4 gigahertz connection. And then you can go back to your 5G. So disconnect 5G. Just fucking play with it. It's always that way. Never fails. Something's up, Never fails. How is everyone out there? How do I sound tonight? Is everything sounding okay? I learned a lot since our last stream. I learned a lot of shit. What I learned was that I was setting up all this stuff through my mic. An EQ, Scroll Keeper. What's going? And I'll bet you Vic is sick too, because of course he's gonna be, because he's in the house of sickness now. Stay on your sick bed, Scroll Keeper, and like it. 100% sick. Yuck. So setting up all this EQ. I got an EQ. I got a sound gate. I got a compressor. I got a de-esser. I got a bunch of shit set up, right? And I'm doing all this stuff. And I had the wrong input going into Streamlabs. So setting it all up sounds great to me. And then I would listen to my own, listen to it after I was done with stream. And I'm like, why don't I sound different? I didn't sound bad. It's a great mic, so I didn't sound bad, but a lot of background noise. DM Liam. We have banned Liam from choosing books because Liam's bad at it. How's your headache, dude? Is your headache gotten better? Can't remember my own damn name, but I can remember that Liam had a headache earlier today. I gave him medicinal advice, so I'm hoping he took it. Still lurking, okay? You've probably heard of this, but I want to... Randall, dude, you found me. Please, everybody, if you could give a shout out to Randall. One of the more talented leatherworkers on YouTube. Doesn't stream a ton, streams intermittently, but has probably forgotten more about leather work than I will ever know. Another advantage is that Randall plays D&D. He's an old schooler, baby. So down in Texas, knocking it out, does a whole bunch of different leather work. Well, also can put you together a beautiful things for your D&D. He's done carvings for covers for journal covers and things like this. Just does great work. Dabbles into things that I don't even touch. I keep looking for the dog. So yeah, so definitely Rathmore made it in. Man, everybody, all the cool kids are here tonight. The hell was I talking about? Why my sound didn't sound any damn different. And so couldn't figure it out. And I watched this like obtuse video and they're like, oh, by the way, if you're streaming into Discord, choose this input that you'll now see, and that will bring over all of your effects that you've set up through your mic. And I'm like, wait a minute. Click, 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 click. It brought everything over. Now I started listening to myself and my sound. It sounds completely different and completely screwed up. And it took me forever to figure out. You going fishing in Texas, Randall? There's like 2 lakes in Texas, unless you're going saltwater fishing, but I doubt it. Not where you live. You're probably going to find some freshwater lakes. Probably some, I'll bet you some dammed up rivers that have been made into lakes. So trying to set my EQ right. Nothing sounds right. And it was something just, I was sounding like mechanical. I was sounding like, I don't even know. It was messed up. And finally I found it, and I had to talk to Joe about it. I'm like, Joe, what the fuck is this setting? And he's like, oh, let me tell you, because Joe's done every fucking thing. And there is, my de-esser had a process, and it's how much gets processed through. And trying to get it to change, because I was listening to the wrong output at first, I had the process up to 100%, and I sounded just off. Turned it down to 0, everything sounded awesome. And my EQ was still a little goofed up, but now I could actually hear what my EQ was doing. I drew down a little bit of my only one natural lake in Texas. Yeah, the others are man-made. That's what I figured. Yeah. Are you going natural? Are you going freshwater fishing, Randall, or are you going saltwater fishing? He is a old school fisher person, but she's up near the Great Lakes, so all freshwater in the world up there. Well, currently, until we, dry them all up and then die. But yeah, fresh 1 hour to salt. Okay, cool. So yeah, I've been learning a lot about sound and inputs and all that stuff. So I drew down a little bit of my deeper end, because my voice is already sort of deepish to begin with. Figured that all out and kind of got that all set up. So I should be sounding better. And most importantly, because the process got out of the way, catfish and bass, depends on what hits first. Well, you'll be fishing different though. One's a bottom feeder and one's not. You'll be throwing both, I'm sure. Bass are a blast to catch. So yeah, 2 rods. Thought so. I remember when I was down in Texas, I used to fish catfish with hot dog. Just the cheapest hot dogs I could find on a big old nasty ass sinker and just throw it to the bottom and fuck around with it. I caught quite a few. They're fun to catch, V, not so fun to get off the hook. They don't like it. So yeah, got that sort of sorted out. My mother visited this week. It's catch-up time with Dio. My mother visited this week. And so I've been doing a lot of that. Just busy. Recent follower box is screwed up, though. Can I fix it? Let's see if I can. Armored Wolf. No fit. Why you no fit, Armored Wolf? Why you do this, bro? Other people fit. I wonder what's up with that overlay that it no fit. Text transform, none. Uppercase, lowercase, start case. I don't want that. I don't want that. Will the alignment matter? Left. Oh, that kind of helps. Top, bottom, center. Gel tip. Actually, I like that look better. Why does that box not fit? Oh, no, that doesn't make any sense. What's up, bud? Nothing. Oh, wait. There. Now, drag Armored Wolf over here. Move, you bastard. There we go. I don't like that. But I don't have enough room. But I don't have enough room. I might need to change the font size. Let's go. Oh, now it fits. I don't get anything between 14 and 18, huh? That's just how they're going to do me? Be like that? Is that how it's going to be? Let's do centered. Now that I've got it. Sorry, I'm figuring this out as we go. Follower. Alignment. Center. That's worse. Right? That's even worse. Left? Okay, I guess that's what we're getting. That's what you'll get and you'll like it. All right, I guess that's going to be close enough. Gonna have to be close enough. Man, I don't like that. And Tea Time with Taryn not fitting anymore. Why does people gotta have such long names? I might have to go down to 14 font because people got silly long names. Let's see about it. Donation won't change. Lock you back up. 14 font. Let's make Liam smaller. Pro streamer. Yeah. Oh, the dog's back. Where's the dog? Front door, because that's what helps me most. All right. And so, no. Control Z. Subscriber, unlock. Inventory full. All right, subscriber lock. Asiki Lord, what's going on? Autumn, yeah, hold on, let me get the dog. Be right back. Burb. All right, catching treats back there. I'll have to show you guys catching treats one day. All right, we got inventory full set up now. We want follower unlocked, 14 font. I'll do the rest of the overlays when I get done. Done, unlocked, move. Even. Okay, lock. Cheerer. 14 font. Done. Okay, that looks okay. All right, lock everything back up. Call it a day. All right, people. So we've got a couple of streams coming up here. A couple of streams coming up of the Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka. This is considered sort of an existential book. It's a strange book. I don't know how this is going to go. This is kind of my hey, there's the doggo. Oh, we got a cactus. Give me cactus. Give me cactus. Give me, give me, give me. Yep, that's it. That's my whole life right there. So I guess you guys get to see Doggo tonight. Let me move. There we go. Now you guys can see Doggo. Salty gave Autumn her cactus. And so, I don't know. All she kept doing with my mom here is trying to give her the damn saguaro. And no, my mom was like, screw it. That's so true. That's so true. So we're going to read Metamorphosis. It's going to take a couple of sessions. So especially when I start, it takes me 20 minutes to even start reading. So let's get started, y'all, and see what we've got going on tonight. And then we will come back next week and probably end up finishing up Metamorphosis. I'm sure I'm going to be doing some bedtime for Salty streams. If you're not following down below, for the YouTube, I do have a YouTube channel that has all of the latest ones that sound good. I took some of the ones that sound like ass out of it. Yay to allergies. Took all the ones that sounded like crap. The last one was there. Go on. I also need to start getting some emotes together. I saw a suggestion by V that I might steal. It was in Gurnfern's stream. And it was an idea of a mimic heart. And I think I love that. We'll just start with a heart and have it just go, bruh. Oh, that's for Gren? I can't have, does she decide to have it? Waiting for V to respond here. It's fine. I'll talk to Gren. If she wants to do it, she can. Well, we both could. It's a freaking cool idea. I love the idea. So we'll see. All right. We've got a dog with a saguaro. I hope everybody has their favorite beverage this eve. I took a nap, so I have a lot of energy. It's going to be a late night tonight, kids. V loves to eat ice cream out of bowls. She refuses to eat ice cream out of the box or out of the bucket. Oh, it's a drumstick ice cream. Okay. Still no bowl. Okay. All right. Let's read some Metamorphosis, kids. A Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka. I don't know what year. Back up to the top. Let's see if we can find the year. I don't have it. Translated by Dave Wiley. He's dead, so he's not going to be mad at me, but I don't know how to pronounce that. Go back. There's a page with black text. There it is. Don't know what year it came out still. I didn't know about that. Now we know. Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka, translated by Dave Wiley with apologies to Dave. Are we okay with the music? Is Spotify at too high of a level, too low of a level? I think I'm okay with the music. Just don't want to overpower or underpower. Let me know where you guys are at. Sounds good to you. Thank you, Scroll Keeper. One morning when Gregor Samsa woke from troubled dreams, he found himself transformed in his bed to a horrible vermin. He lay on his armor-like back and he lifted his head a little. If he lifted his head a little, he could see his brown belly, slightly domed and divided by arches and stiff sections. The bedding was hardly able to cover it and seemed ready to slide off at any moment. His many legs, pitifully thin compared with the size of the rest of him, waved about helplessly as he looked. What's happened to me, he thought. It wasn't a dream. His room, a proper human room, although a little too small, lay peacefully between its four familiar walls. A collection of textile samples spread out on the table. Samsa was a traveling salesman. And above it there hung a picture that he had recently cut out of an illustrated magazine and housed in a nice gilded frame. It showed a lady fitted out with a fur hat and a fur boa who sat upright, raising a heavy fur muff that covered the whole of her lower arm towards the viewer. Gregor then turned to look out the window at the dull weather. Drops of rain could be heard hitting the pane, which made him feel quite sad. How about if I sleep a little bit longer and forget all this nonsense, he thought. But that was something he was unable to do because he wasn't used to sleeping on his right, and in his present state, he couldn't get back. He was used to sleeping on his right, and in his present state, he couldn't get back into that position. However hard he threw himself to the right, he always rolled back to where he was. He must have tried 100 times, shut his eyes so he wouldn't have to look at his floundering legs, and only stopped when he began to feel a mild, dull pain there, which he had never felt before. Oh God, he thought, what a strenuous career is this? It is that I have chosen. Traveling day in and day out, doing business like this takes much more effort than doing your own business at home. And on top of that, there's the curse of traveling, worries about making train connections, bad and irregular food, contact with different people all the time so that you can never get to know anyone or become friendly with them. It can all go to hell. He felt a slight itch up on his belly, pushed himself slowly up on his back towards the headboard so that he could lift his head better. Found where the itch was and saw that it was covered with little white spots which he didn't know what to make of. And when he tried to feel the place with one of his legs, he drew it quickly back because as soon as it touched it, he was overcome by a cold shudder. Hey, Callie, what's going on? He slid back into his former position. Getting up early all the time, he thought, it makes you stupid. You've got to get enough sleep. Other travel salesmen live a life of luxury. For instance, whenever I go back to the guest house during the morning to copy out the contract, these gentlemen are still sitting there eating their breakfasts. I ought to just try that with my boss. I'd get kicked out on the spot. But who knows? Maybe that would be the best thing for me. If I didn't have my parents to think about, I'd have given in my notice a long time ago. I'd have gone up to the boss and told him just what I think. Tell him everything I would. Let him know just what I feel. He'd fall right off the desk. And it's a funny sort of business to be sitting up there at your desk, talking down at your subordinates from up there, especially when you have to go right up close to the boss who is hard of hearing. Well, there is some hope. Once I've got the money together to pay for my parents' debt to him, another 5 or 6 years, I suppose. Damn. That definitely is what I'll do. That's when I'll make the big change. First of all, I've got to get up because my train leaves at 5. Yeah, it's a very happy pupper. It's chilling. That's Autumn. Autumn's chilling. Hi, Autumn. How are you, baby? Chilling. Then he looked over at the alarm clock ticking on the chest of drawers. God in heaven, he thought. It's 6:30 and the hands were quietly moving forward. And even later than 6:30, more like 6:45. Had the alarm clock not rung? He could see from the bed that it had been set to 4 o'clock, as it should have been. It certainly must have rung. Yes, but it was possible to quietly sleep through the furniture rattling noise. True, he had not slept peacefully, but probably all the more deeply because of that. What should he do now? The next train was at 7. If he were to catch that, he would have to rush like mad, and the collection of samples was still not packed, and he didn't feel all particularly fresh and lively. And even if he did catch the train, he would not avoid his boss's anger, as the office assistant would have been there to see the 5 o'clock train go. He would have put in his report about Gregor not being there a long time ago. Snitches. Callie Sanders, snoot booper. The office assistant is a snitch, yo. I'll bust a cap in his ass. The office assistant was the boss's man, spineless with no understanding. What about if he reported sick? That would be extremely strange and suspicious, as in 5 years of service, Gregor has never once yet been ill. His boss would certainly come around with a doctor from the medical insurance company, accusing his parents of having a lazy son, and accepted the doctor's recommendation not to make any claims, as the doctor believed no one was ever ill, but that many were work shy. And what's more, he would have gone entirely, what would he have been entirely wrong in this case? Gregor did, in fact, apart from excessive sleepiness after sleeping so long, feel completely well, and even felt much hungrier than usual. Yeah, the doctor's an asshole. He was still hurriedly thinking all this through, unable to decide to get out of bed, when the clock struck 7:15. There was a cautious knock at the door near his head. "Gregor," someone called. It was his mother. "It's 7:15. Didn't you want to go somewhere?" That gentle voice. Gregor was shocked that he had heard his own voice answering. It could hardly be recognized as the voice he had before. As if from deep inside him there was a painful and uncontrollable squeaking mixed in with it. The words could be made out at first, but then there was a sort of echo which made them unclear, leaving the hearer unsure whether he had heard it properly or not. Gregor had wanted to give a full answer and explain everything, but in the circumstances, contented himself with saying, "Yes, mother. Yes, thank you. I'm getting up now." Gren, no cookies. It's a Gren, no cookies. Gren, we have a question for you. V had an idea of a heart that turns into a mimic, and I thought that was a really cool idea. So I wanted it for my stream. Would that be okay? I want to steal the mimic heart. It's up to you, Gren. I think it would be a good idea. Uh-oh. I lost my camera. Hold on. I gotta do what V taught me to do. I'm locked up. I know why it happened. I had to turn off my monitor for a second. It's V's idea. Okay. Webcam. V said to go to it. That's the webcam label. Go to it and video capture device. Video capture device. And what do I gotta do, V? Oh, deactivate? Activate. Wonder Twin powers. Ha ha! Pro streamer. I'm fixing everything because I'm an idiot for screwing it up. I figured out now why that happens. I mean, the idea to Gren. I give it to Gren. Damn it. All right, well, I'm screwed. Pupper, did you hear something? Autumn. Autumn, what'd you hear? Oh, is it Gren no cookies? Is it Gren no cookies? Where is she? Where's Gren no cookies? Give her the saguaro. No? Okay. Gren, I'm sorry you don't get the saguaro. What gets me about Gregor here at this point, kids, is he's a fucking bug, right? He's a bug. And he's still just kind of going about his daily business. He's like, "Nah, I don't feel like getting up. My saguaro. I left my wallet in my saguaro. Left my wallet." Yeah, so I'm not sure what's going on. All right. "Yes, mother. Yes, thank you. I'm getting up now." The change in Gregor's voice probably could not be noticed outside the wooden door, as his mother was satisfied with this explanation and shuffled away. But this short conversation made the other members of the family aware that Gregor, against their expectations, was still at home. And as soon as father came knocking on the other side doors, gently but with his fist, "Gregor, Gregor," he called, "what's wrong?" After a short while, he called again with a warning deepness in his voice. "Gregor, Gregor!" At the other side door, his sister came plaintively. "Gregor, aren't you well? Do you need anything?" Gregor answered to both sides. I'm ready now," making an effort to remove all the strangeness from his voice by enunciating very carefully and putting long pauses between each individual word. So that would have been like, "I'm ready now." His father went back to his breakfast, but his sister whispered, "Gregor, open the door. I beg of you." Gregor, however, had no thought of opening the door and instead congratulated himself for his cautious habit acquired from his traveling of locking all doors at night when he was at home. My mom is texting me, telling me about she's at the gate in Detroit. She had an hour delay, but she had a 3-hour layover in Detroit, so she was good to go. She gets real nervous traveling, and so she's very happy when things work out. 42. It took her 42 minutes to get to the other gate. She's in a wheelchair, not fully. She travels in a wheelchair because she's older. She's 80 now, so someone was pushing her. But all right. The first thing he wanted to do was get up in peace without being disturbed, to get dressed, and most of all to have his breakfast. Only then he would consider what to do next, as he was well aware that he could not bring his thoughts to any sensible conclusions by lying in bed. Yeah, it is a heck of a long run. Yeah, safe flight to House Mom. Yeah, she'll be good. She's getting home late though, man. Getting home late. He remembered awkwardly that he often felt a slight pain in bed, perhaps caused by lying awkwardly, but that he'd always turned out to be pure imagination, and he wondered how his imaginations would slowly resolve themselves today. He did not have the slightest doubt that the change in his voice was nothing more than a sign of a serious cold, which was an occupational hazard for a traveling salesman. It was a simple matter to throw off the covers, but he had to blow himself up a little as they fell off by themselves. He only had to blow himself up a little and they fell off by themselves. But it became difficult after that, especially as he was so exceptionally broad. He would have used his arms and hands to push himself up, but instead of them, he only had those little legs continuously moving in different directions, in which he was moreover unable to control. If he wanted to bend one of them, then what was the first one that would stretch itself out? And if he finally managed to do what he wanted with that leg, all the others seemed to be free and would be moving about painfully. This is something that can't be done in bed. So don't keep trying to do it, Gregor said to himself. The first thing he wanted to do was get the lower part of his body out of bed, but he's never seen this lower part and he could not imagine what it looked like. It turned out to be hard to move. It went so slowly and finally, almost in a frenzy, he carelessly shoved himself forward with all the force he could gather. He chose the wrong direction. He hit against the lower bedpost and learned from the burning pain that the lower part of his body might well, at present, be the most sensitive. So then he tried to get the top part out of bed first, carefully turning his head to the side. This he managed quite easily, and despite its breadth and weight, the bulk of his body eventually followed slowly in the direction of his head. But when he last got his head out of bed and into fresh air, it occurred to him that if he let himself fall, it would be a miracle if his head were not injured. So he became afraid to carry on pushing himself forward the same way. He could not knock himself out now at any price. Better to stay in bed than to lose consciousness. See, I say that about getting out of bed every day. Just stay in bed. It's better than to stay in bed than to lose consciousness. It took just as much effort to get back to where he had been earlier, but there he lay sighing and was once more watching his legs as they struggled against each other harder than before. It was, if that was possible, he could think of no other way of bringing peace and order to this chaos. He told himself once more that it was not possible for him to stay in bed and that the most sensible thing to do would be to get free of it, whatever he could and whatever sacrifice. At the same time, though, he did not forget to remind himself that calm consideration was much better than running to desperate conclusions. At times like this, he would direct his eyes to the window and look out clearly as he could, but unforgivingly, even the other side of the narrow street was enveloping the morning fog, and the view had little confidence to cheer to offer him. 7 o'clock already, he said to himself when the clock struck again. 7 o'clock and there's still a fog like this? And he lay there quietly a little longer, breathing lightly, as if he perhaps expected the total stillness to bring back their real and natural state. But then he said to himself, before it strikes 7:15, I'll definitely have to have gotten out of bed properly. And by then someone will have come around from work to ask what happened to me as they open up work before 7 o'clock. And so he set himself to the task of swinging the entire length of his body out of bed at the same time. If he succeeded in falling out of bed in this way, he kept his head raised as he did so, he could probably avoid injuring it. His back seemed to be quite hard, and probably nothing would happen to it if he fell onto the carpet. His main concern was the loud noise it was bound to make, and which even through the doors would probably raise concern, if not alarm. But it was something he had to be risked. When Gregor was already sticking halfway out of the bed, the new method was more of a game than effort. All he had to do was rock back and forth. It occurred to him how simple everything would be if somebody came to help him. Two strong people, he and his father, had his father and the maid in mind, would have been more than enough. They would have to just push their arms under the dome of his back, peel him away from the bed, bend down with the load, and be patient and careful as he swang, "I have the saguaro. It shall not be given back to the dog, for the saguaro is mine." "You are a fool. A fool has lost your saguaro. You shall not have it back." "Chat, shall I give saguaro back to the doggo?" "No. Give it back to her, okay?" I'm hearing strange differences here. "Yes, give it back. Give back." "Anybody else?" "This saguaro is now mine. You shall not have it. You fool. Give me your eye boogers." Okay, those are fixed now. I was yelling at you. All right. She has it back. A lesson must be taught. I would give it back. Chew on it first and then give it back. Saguaro must be given back. Okay, well, we figured it out. I didn't chew on it first. It's being chewed on now. Ah. 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 Oh. Oh boy. I've angered the saguaro haver, and now you've done it. Yeah. Okay. Should he really call for help though? Even apart from the fact that the doors were locked? Despite all the difficulty he was in, he could not suppress a smile at this thought. "Prove that you're the alpha in this pack, Dio." "Give me that saguaro. Give me the saguaro. Give me the saguaro." "I have proven as you have wished." Alpha theory's wrong? You're wrong, Cal. Your face is wrong. Don't tell Dio that. After a while, he'd already moved. Callie's right. After a while, he'd already moved so far across that it would have been hard for him to keep his balance if he rocked too hard. This time was now 7:10, and he would have to make his final decision very soon. Then there was a ring at the door on the flat. "That'll be someone from work," he said to himself, and froze very still, although his legs only became all the more lively as they danced around. For a moment, everything remained quiet. "They're not opening the door," Gregor said to himself, caught in nonsensical hope. But of course, the maid's firm steps went to the door as ever and opened it. Gregor only needed to hear the visitor's first words of greeting to know who it was. It was the chief clerk himself. Why did Gregor have to be the only one condemned to work for a company where they immediately became highly suspicious of the slightest shortcoming? Chief clerk. Yeah, chief clerk. Where they became immediately suspicious at the slightest shortcoming. Were all employers, every one of them, louts? Was there not one of them who was faithful and devoted, who would go so mad with pangs of conscience that he couldn't get out of bed if he didn't spend at least a couple more hours in the morning on company business? Was it really not enough to let one of the trainees make inquiries, assuming inquiries were even necessary? Did the chief clerk had to come himself? And did they have to show the whole innocent family that was so suspicious that only the chief clerk could be trusted to have the wisdom to investigate it? All right, so I think we need a poll here. Okay? I think we take this part, take this part here, copy, and we make that into a pull. Okay, pull, pull, paste. Okay. We'll make 5 minutes. Oh, the content doesn't, sorry. I had a swear in there. Let me fix it. Start poll. Why is it not? Oh, apparently that's a swear too. Okay. Okay, we'll do it that way. Hey, it worked. It is an example of existentialism, and you'll kind of see why towards the end, I think. Okay, so we've already read that one. Blah, 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 blah. Okay. And more because these thoughts had made him upset than through any proper decision, he swung himself with all of the force out of bed. There was a loud thump, but it really wasn't a loud noise. His fall was cushioned a little by the carpet, and Gregor's back was also more elastic than he thought, which made the sound muffled and not too noticeable. He had held his head carefully enough, though, and hit the carpet as it fell. Annoyed and in pain, he turned and rubbed it against the carpet. "Something's fallen down in there," said the chief clerk in the room on the left. Gregor tried to imagine whether something of the sort had happened to him today. Whether something of the sort that had happened to him today could ever possibly happen to the chief clerk too. You had to concede that it was possible. But as if a gruff reply to this question, the chief clerk's firm footsteps and highly polished boots could now be heard in the adjoining room. From the room to his right, Gregor whispered to let him know, Gregor, the chief clerk is here." "Yes, I know," Gregor said to himself, but without daring to raise his voice loud enough for his sister to hear. "Gregor," said his father now in the room to his left, "the chief clerk has come around and wants to know why you didn't leave on the early train. We don't know what to say to him, and anyway, he wants to speak to you personally." That song sucks. "So please open up." "I'm sure up yours, chief clerk. I'm sure. Can't find where I was. I'm sure he'll be good enough to forgive the untidiness of your room." Then the chief clerk called, "Good morning, Mr. Samsa." "He isn't well," said his mother to the chief clerk, while his father continued to speak through the door. "He isn't well, please believe me. Why else would Gregor have missed the train? The lad only ever thinks about the business. It nearly makes me cross the way he never goes out in the evenings. He's been in town for a week now, but stayed home every evening. He sits with us in the kitchen and just reads the paper or studies the train timetables. His idea of relaxation is working with his fret saw. He's made a little frame, for instance. It took him only 2 or 3 evenings. You'd be amazed how nice it is. It's hanging up in his room. You'll see as soon as Gregor opens the door. Anyway, I'm glad you're here. We wouldn't have been able to get Gregor to open the door by ourselves. He's so stubborn, and I'm sure he isn't well. He said this morning that he is, but he isn't." "I'll be there in a moment," said Gregor slowly and thoughtfully, without moving so he would not miss any word of the conversation. "Well, I can't think of any other way of explaining it, Miss Samsa," said the chief clerk. "I hope it's nothing serious, but on the other hand, I must say that we people in commerce ever so became slightly unwell then, fortunately and unfortunately as you like, we'd simply have to overcome it because of business considerations." "Can the chief clerk come in and see you now then?" asked his father impatiently, knocking at the door again. "No," said Gregor. In the room to his right, there became a painful silence. In the room on his right, his sister began to cry. Now look what you've done, Gregor. You've made your sister cry. So why did his sister not go join the others? She probably only just got up and not even begun to get dressed. And why was she crying? Was it because he had not gotten up and had not let the chief clerk in? because he was in danger of losing his job and what happened to his boss once would pursue their parents with the same demands as before? There was no need to worry about things like that yet. Gregor was still there, and he had not only the slightest intention of abandoning his family. Autumn, no. Come here. For the time being, he would just lay there on the carpet, and no one who knew the condition he was in would seriously have expected him to let the chief clerk in. It was only a minor discourtesy, and with a suitable excuse, he could easily be found for it later on. It was not something for which Gregor could be sacked for on the spot. And it seemed to Gregor much more sensible to leave him now in peace instead of disturbing him with talking to him and crying. But the others didn't know what was happening. They were worried, and that would excuse their behavior. The chief clerk now raised his voice. "Mr. Samsa," he called to him, "what is wrong? You barricade yourself in your room, give us no more yes or no for your answer. You're causing serious and unnecessary concern to your parents, and you fail. And I mention this just by the way. You fail to carry out your business duties in a way that's quite unheard of. I'm speaking here on behalf of your parents. I'm speaking here on behalf of your parents and your employer, and really must request a clear and immediate explanation." Our poll is done. And the answer was no. Not every employer is, what was the word? Daft? I don't remember what they asked. Not every employer. I think because I split the yes answers. Don't know. Unsure. I am not hearing the word clerk. I'm hearing a different word. Does it start with a C and end with K, Callie? I'm quite astonished. I am astonished. Quite astonished. I thought I knew you as a calm and sensible person. Now you suddenly seem to be showing off with peculiar whims. Oh. This morning, your employer did suggest a possible reason for your failure to appear. It's true. It had to do with money that recently was entrusted to you, but I came near to giving him my word of honor that it could not be the right explanation. But now with your incomprehensible stubbornness, I no longer feel any wish whatsoever to intercede on your behalf. And nor is your position all that secure. I originally intended to say all this to you in private, but since you caused me to waste my time here for no good reason, I don't see why your parents should not learn of it. Your turnover has been very unsatisfactory as of late. I grant you this is not the time of year to do especially good business. We recognize that, but there's simply no time of year to do no business at all, Mr. Samsa. We cannot allow there to be. Dude is 2 hours late. And they sent someone to his house and they just running up the whole family. But, sir, called Gregor beside himself and forgetting all else in excitement, I'll open up immediately. Just a moment. I'm slightly unwell, an attack of dizziness. I haven't been able to get up. I'm still now in bed. I'm quite fresh again now, though. I'm just getting out of bed. Just a moment. Be patient. It's not quite as easy as I thought. I'm quite all right now, though. It's shocking how suddenly it happens to a person. I was quite all right last night. My parents know about it, perhaps better than me. I had a small symptom of it last night already. They must have noticed it. I don't know why I didn't let you know at work. But you always think you can get over any illness without staying at home. Please don't make my parents suffer. There's no basis for any of the accusations you're making. Nobody's ever said a word to me about these things. Maybe you haven't read the latest contracts I set in. I'll set off at 8 o'clock train as well. These few hours of rest have given me strength. You don't need to wait, sir. I'll be in the office after you. Please be so good to tell the boss and recommend me to him. And while Gregor gushed out these words, hardly knowing what he was saying, he made his way over to the chest of drawers. This was easily done because of the practice he'd already had in bed, where he now tried to get himself upright. He really did want to open the door. Really did want to let him see him and speak with the chief clerk. And the others were being so insistent, and he was curious to learn what they would say when they caught sight of him. If they were shocked, then it would be no longer Gregor's responsibility and he could rest. If, however, they took everything calmly, he would still have no reason to be upset, and if he hurried, he really could be at the station for 8 o'clock. The first 2 times he tried to climb up on the smooth chest of drawers, he just slid down again. But he finally gave up gave himself one last swing and stood there upright. The lower part of his body was in serious pain, but he no longer gave any attention to it. Now he let himself fall against the back of a nearby chair. He held it tightly to the edges with his little legs. But now he had calmed down and kept so quiet that he could listen to what the chief clerk was saying. "Did you understand a word of all that?" The chief clerk asked his parents. "Surely he's trying not to make a fool of us." "Oh God," called his mother, who was already in tears. "He could be seriously ill and we're making him suffer." Greta, she cried. "Mother?" His sister called from the other side. They communicated across Gregor's room. "You'll have to go to the doctor straight away. Gregor's ill. Quick, get the doctor. Did you hear the way Gregor spoke just now? That was the voice of an animal," said the chief clerk, and with a calmness that was in a contrast with the mother's screams. Anna! His father called into the kitchen. They were in the entrance hall, clapping his hands. "Get a locksmith here, now!" And the two girls, their skirts swishing, immediately ran out into the hall, wrenching open the front door of the flat as they went. How had his sister managed to get dressed so quickly? There was no sound of the banging shut again. They must have left it open. People often do in homes when there's something awful has happened. Gregor, in contrast, had become much calmer. So they couldn't understand his words anymore. Although they seemed clear enough to him, clearer than before, perhaps his ears were used to the sound. They had realized, though, that there was something wrong with him, and they were ready to help. His first response to the situation had been confident and wise, and that made him feel better. He felt that he had been drawn back in amongst people from the doctor and the locksmith. He felt that he had been drawn back in among people, and from the doctor and locksmith he expected great and surprising achievements, although he did not really distinguish one from the other. Whatever was said next would be crucial, so in order to make his voice as clear as possible, he coughed a little. But taking care not to do this too loudly, as even this might well be sound different from the way the human coughs, and he was no longer, though, he could judge this for himself. Meanwhile, it had become quiet in the next room. Perhaps his parents sat at the table whispering to the chief clerk, or perhaps they were all pressed against the door and listening. Gregor slowly pushed his way over to the door with the chair. Once there, he let go of it and threw himself onto the door. Holding himself upright against it and using the adhesive on the tips of his legs, he rested there a little to recover from the effort involved and then set himself the task of turning the key in the lock with his mouth. He seemed, unfortunately, to have no proper teeth. How was he, then, even to grasp the key? But the lack of teeth, of course, made up for the very strong jaw. Using the jaw, he was able to start the key turning, ignoring the fact that he must have been causing some kind of damage as brown fluid came from his mouth, flowed over the key, and dripped onto the floor. "Listen," said the chief clerk in the next room. "He's turning the key." Gregor was greatly encouraged by this, but all should have been calling to him, his mother and father. "Well done, Gregor," they said. "Keep at it. Keep hold of the lock." And with the idea that they were all excitedly following his efforts, he bit on the key with all his strength, paying no attention to the pain it was causing him. As the key turned round, he turned around the lock with it, only holding himself upright with his mouth, and hung onto the key or pushed down again with his whole weight as his body needed. The clear sound of the lock as it snapped was Gregor's sign that he could break his concentration, and he regained all breath as he said to himself, "So, I didn't need the locksmith after all." Then he lay his head on the handle of the door to open it completely. Because he had to open the door in this way, he was already in the wide open. It was already wide open before he could be seen. He had to slowly turn himself around one of the double doors. He had to do it very carefully if he did not want to fall flat on his back before entering the room. He was still occupied with this difficult movement, unable to pay attention to anything else, when he heard the chief clerk exclaim with a loud, "Oh!" which sounded like the soughing of the wind. Now he also saw him. He was the nearest to the door, his hand pressed against his open mouth and slowly retreating as if driven by a steady invisible force. Gregor's mother, her hair still disheveled from bed, despite the chief clerk's being there, looked at his father. Then she unfolded her arms, took 2 steps forward towards Gregor, and sank down into the floor into her skirts that had spread around her as her head disappeared down into her breast. His father looked hostile. He clenched his fist as he wanted to knock Gregor back into the room. And then he looked uncertainly around the room, covering his eyes with his hands, and wept so that his powerful chest shook. So Gregor did not want to go into the room, but leaned the inside of the other door, which had still held bolted in place. And this was only half of his body could be seen, along with his head above it, which he leaned over to one side and peered out at the others. Meanwhile, the day had become much lighter. Part of the endless gray-black building on the other side of the street, which was a hospital, could be seen quite clearly with the austere and regular lines of windows piercing its facade. The rain was still falling, now throwing down large individual droplets which hit the ground one at a time. The washing up for breakfast lay on the table. There was so much of it because, for Gregor's father, breakfast was the most important meal of the day, and he would stretch it out for several hours as he sat reading a number of different newspapers. On the wall exactly opposite, there was a photograph of Gregor when he was a lieutenant in the army, his sword in his hand and a carefree smile on his face as he called forth respect in his uniform and bearing. The door to the entrance hall was open. As the front door of the flat was now open, he could see into the landing and the stairs where they were down below. "Now then," said Gregor, well aware he was the only one to have kept calm. "I'll get dressed straight away, and now pack up my samples and set off. Will you please just let me leave? You can see," he said to the chief clerk, "that I'm not stubborn, and I do like my job. Being a commercial traveler is arduous, but without the traveling, I couldn't learn my living. So, where are you going? Into the office? Yes? Will you report everything accurately then? It's quite possible for someone to be temporarily unable to work, but that's just the right time to remember what's been achieved in the past and consider that later on. Once the difficulty has been removed, he will certainly work with all the more diligence and concentration. You're well aware that I'm seriously in debt to our employer, as well as having to look after my parents and my sister, so that I'm trapped in a difficult situation, but I'll work my way out of it again. Please don't make things any harder for me than they already are. And don't take sides against me at the office. I know that nobody likes the travelers. They think we earn an enormous wage as well as having a soft time of it. That's just prejudice, but they have no particular reason to think better of it. But you, sir, have a better overview than the rest of the staff. In fact, I can say this in confidence, a better overview than the boss himself. It's very easy for a businessman like him to make mistakes about his employees and judge them more harshly than he should. And you're also aware that we travelers spend almost the whole year away from the office, so that we can very easily fall victim to gossip and chance the groundless complaints. And it's almost impossible to defend yourself from that sort of thing. We don't usually even hear about them. Or if it's that way when we get back home exhausted from a trip, and then we feel the harmful effects of what's going on without even knowing what has caused them. Please don't go away. At least first say something to show that you grant that I'm at least partly right." But the chief clerk had turned away as soon as Gregor started to speak, and with protruding lips only started to stared back at him over his trembling shoulders as he left. He did not keep still for a moment while Gregor was speaking, but moved steadily towards the door without taking his eyes off of him. He moved very gradually, as if there had been some secret prohibition on him leaving the room, But it was only when he had reached the entrance hall that he made sudden movement, drew his foot from the living room, and rushed out in a panic. In the hall, he stretched his right hand far out towards the hallway, as if out there were some supernatural force waiting to save him. Gregor realized that it was out of question to let the chief clerk go away in this mood if his position in the firm were not to be put in extreme danger. There was something his parents didn't understand very well. Over the years, they had become convinced that this job would provide Gregor for his entire life, and besides, they had so much to worry about at present that they had lost sight of any thought of the future. Gregor, although, didn't think about the future. Did think about the future. The chief clerk had to be held back, calmed down, convinced, and finally won over. The future of Gregor and his family depended on it. If only his sister were here. She was clever. She was already in tears while Gregor was still lying on his back. And the chief clerk was a lover of women. Surely she could persuade him. She would be close to the front door at the entrance hall and talk him out of his shocked state. But his sister was not there, and Gregor would have to do the job himself. And without considering that he was still not familiar with how well he could move about in his present state, or that his speech still might not, or probably would not, be understood, he let go of the door, pushing himself through the opening, and tried to reach the chief clerk on the landing, who ridiculously was holding onto the banister with both hands. But Gregor fell immediately over, and with a little scream, as he sought something to hold on to, landed on his numerous legs. Hardly had that happened to him. For the first time today, he began to feel all right with his body. The little legs had solid ground under them, and to his pleasure, they did exactly as he told them to. They were even making the effort to carry him as he wanted to go, as soon as believing that all his sorrows would be finally at an end. He held back the urge to move, but swayed from side to side as he crouched there on the floor. The dog has to go out again. I'll be right back. And we're back. He held back the urge to move, but swayed from side to side as he crouched there on the floor. His mother was not far in front of him and seemed at first quite engrossed in herself. But then she suddenly jumped up with her arms outstretched and her fingers spreading. "Help! For pity's sake, help!" The way she held her head suggested she wanted to see Gregor better, but the unthinking way she was hurrying backwards showed that she did not. She had forgotten that the table was behind her with all the breakfast things on it. When she reached the table, she quickly sat down on it without knowing what she was doing, and without even seeming to notice that the coffee pot had been knocked over and a gush of coffee was pouring down the carpet. Mother, Gregor said gently, looking up at her. He had completely forgotten the chief clerk for the moment. He could not help himself snapping in the air with his jaws at the slight flow of coffee. This set his mother screaming anew. She fled from the table and into the arms of her father as he rushed towards her. Gregor, though, had no time to spare for his parents now. The chief clerk had already reached the stairs. With his chin on the banister, he looked back for the last time. Gregor made a run for him. He wanted to make sure of reaching him. The chief clerk must have expected something as he leapt several downstairs at a time and disappeared, his shouts resounding all around the staircase. The flight of the chief clerk seemed unfortunately to put Gregor's father into a panic as well. Until then, who had been relatively self-controlled, but now, instead of running after him, the chief clerk himself, or at least not impeding Gregor as he ran after him, Gregor's father seized the chief clerk's stick in his right hand. The chief clerk had left it behind on a chair, along with his hat and overcoat. Pick up a large newspaper from the table with his left and use them to drive Gregor back into his room, stamping his foot at him as he went. Gregor's appeals to his father were no help. His appeals were simply not understood. However much he humbly turned his head, his father simply stamped his foot all the harder. Across the room, despite the chilly weather, Gregor's mother had pulled open the window, leaned far out of it, and pressed her hands to her face. A strong draft of air flew in from the streets towards the stairway. The curtains flew up. The newspapers on the table fluttered, and some of them were blown onto the floor. Nothing would stop Gregor's father as he drove him back, making hissing noises at him like a wild man. Gregor had never had any practice in moving backwards and was only able to go very slowly. If Gregor had only been allowed to turn around, he could have been back in the room straight away. But he was afraid that if he took the time to do that, his father would become more impatient, and there was the threat of a lethal blow to his head or back with the stick his father had at any moment. Eventually, though, Gregor realized that he had no choice as he saw, to his disgust, that he was quite incapable of going backwards in a straight line. So he began, as quickly as possible, with frequent anxious glances at his father, to turn himself around. It went very slowly. "Hello, Salty. How are you, baby? You made it here. Yay. It's almost bedtime for Jojamart." Eventually, though, Gregor realized he had no choice. Okay, so he's backing up. It went very slowly, but perhaps his father was able to see the good intentions as he did nothing to hinder him. In fact, now, as he used the tip of his stick to give directions from a distance as to which way to turn. If only his father would stop that unbearable hissing. It was making Gregor quite confused. When he had nearly finished turning round, still listening to all that hissing, he made a mistake and turned himself back a little way the way he came. He was pleased when he finally had his head in the doorway, though. But he saw that it was still too narrow, and his body was still too broad to get through it without any further difficulty. In his present mood, it obviously did not occur to his father to open the other double door so that Gregor would have enough space to get through. He was merely fixed on the idea that Gregor should get back into the room as quickly as possible. Nor would he ever allow Gregor the time to get himself upright as preparation for getting through the doorway. What he did, making the noise more than ever, was to drive Gregor forwards all the harder as if there was nothing in the way. It sounded to Gregor as if there was now more than one father behind him. It was not a pleasant experience, and Gregor pushed himself into the doorway without regard for what might happen. One side of his body lifted itself, and he lay at an angle in the doorway. One of his flanks scraped on the white door, and it was painfully injured, leaving a vile brown flecks on it. Soon he was stuck fast, and would not have been able to move by himself, the little legs along one side hooked and quivering in the air, while those on the other side were pressed painfully against the ground. Then his father gave him a hefty shove from behind, which released him from where he was, sent him flying, and heavily bleeding deep into his room. The door was slammed shut with a stick, and finally all was quiet. So Gregor's a bug. Gregor's a bug, and the boss sent someone to check up on him. And, yeah, he missed the train. And things aren't going well for Gregor. We did determine that we didn't think all employers were terrible sots. And we're going to figure out what happens to Gregor here. Yeah, poor Gregor. I mean, he's hopeful, or he was hopeful that he still had a shot at things. But we'll see what happens to his mind frame now. What gets me about these novels is how quickly people just fall down and start crying. Like his sister started crying for no reason. His mom was crying because he couldn't leave the room for 2 hours. Like, all you got to do is be like, you not feeling well? My bad, let me get you some Dayquil, bruh. And they're like, no, call for the doctor, call for the locksmith, fall down, start crying. People these days. It was not until it was getting dark that evening that Gregor awoke from his deep and coma-like sleep. He would have woken soon afterwards anyway if he had not been disturbed. And soon, I'd love if my kid didn't leave his room for 2 hours, right? Or just leave you alone for 2 hours? He would have been woken soon afterwards anyway, even if he hadn't been disturbed. And he had enough sleep and felt fully rested. But he had the impression that some hurried steps and the sound of the door leading to the front room was being carefully shut had woken him. The light from the electric street lamps shone palely here and under the ceiling as the tops of the furniture. But down below where Gregor was, it was dark. He pushed himself over to the door, feeling his way clumsily with his antenna, of which he was now beginning to learn the value, in order to see what was happening there. The whole of his left side seemed like one painfully stretched scar, and he's limped badly on the 2 rows of legs. Let me let the dog back in now, because, we got to play this game all night. One of the legs had been badly injured in the events of that morning, and it was nearly a miracle that only one of them had been, and dragged along lifelessly. It was only when he reached the door that he realized that it was actually what was drawing him over to it. It was the smell of something to eat. By the door, there was a dish filled with sweetened milk and little pieces of white bread floating in it. He was so pleased he almost laughed, and he was even hungrier than he had been that morning, and immediately dipped his head into the milk, nearly covering to his eyes with it. But soon he drew his head back again in disappointment. Not only did the pain in his tender left side make it difficult to eat the food, he was only able to eat if his whole body worked together as a snuffling whole, but the milk did not taste like milk. Milk was normally his favorite drink, and his sister had certainly left it there for him because of that, but he turned almost against his own will away from the dish and crawled back to the center of the room. Through the crack in the door, Gregor could see that the gas had been lit in the living room. His father at this time would normally sat with his evening paper, reading it out in a loud voice to Gregor's mother, and sometimes to his sister, but not a sound could be heard. Gregor's sister would often write and tell him about this reading, but maybe his father had lost the habit in recent times. It was so quiet all around, too, even though there must have been somebody in the flat. What a quiet life it is the family led, Gregor said to himself, and gazing into the darkness felt a great pride that he was able to provide a life like this in such a nice home for his sister and parents. But what now? If all this peace and wealth and comfort should come to a horrible and frightening end, that was something that Gregor did not want to think about too much, so he started to move about, crawling up and down the room. Once during the long evening, the door on one side of the room was opened very slightly and hurriedly closed again. Later on, the door on the other side did the same. It seemed someone needed to enter the room, but thought better of it. Gregor went and waited immediately by the door, resolved either to bring the timorous visitor into the room in some way or at least to figure out who it was. But the door opened no more that night. What's going on, JJ? And Gregor waited in vain. The previous morning, while the doors were locked, everyone wanted to get into him. But now that he had opened up one of the doors, the other had been clearly unlocked sometime during the day, no one came, and the keys were in the other sides. It was not until late at night that the gas lit in the living room was put out, and now it was easy to see his parents and sister had stayed awake all that time, as they could be distinctly heard, then went away together on tiptoe. It was clear no one would come into Gregor's room anymore until morning. That gave him plenty of time to think undisturbed about how he'd have to rearrange his life. For some reason, the tall, empty room where he was forced to remain made him uneasy, and he laid there flat on the floor, even though he had been living in it for 5 years. Hardly aware of what he was doing other than slightly feeling ashamed, he hurried under the couch. It pressed down on his back a little, and he was no longer able to lift his head, but he nonetheless felt immediately at ease, and his only regret was that his broad body was too broad to get underneath it. He spent the whole night there, and some of the time he passed in a light sleep, although he frequently woke from it in alarm because of his hunger, and some of the time spent in worries and vague hopes, which, however, always led to the same conclusion. For the time being, he must remain calm. He must show patience and the greatest consideration so that his family could bear the unpleasantness that he, in his present condition, was forced to impose on them. Gregor soon had the opportunity to test the strength of his decisions, and early the next morning, almost before the night had ended, his sister, nearly fully dressed, opened the door into the front room and looked anxiously in. She didn't see him right away, but when she did notice him under the couch, he had to be somewhere, for God's sake. He couldn't have flown away. She was so shocked that she lost control of herself and slammed the door shut again from the outside. But she seemed to regret her behavior as she opened the door straight away and came in on tiptoe as if entering the room of some seriously ill or even some stranger. Gregor had pushed his head forward right to the edge of the couch and watched her. Would she notice that he had left the milk as it was? Realize that not from any lack of hunger and bring him some other food that was more suitable? If she didn't do it herself, he would go rather hungry, then draw her attention to it, although he did feel a terrible urge to rush forward from under the couch, throw himself at his sister's feet, and beg for something good to eat. However, his sister noticed the dish immediately, looked at it, and the few drops of milk splashed around it with some surprise. She immediately picked it up, using a rag, not with her bare hands, and carried it out. Gregor was extremely curious as what she would bring in its place, imagining all the wildest possibilities. But he never could have guessed what his sister, in her goodness, actually did bring. In order to test his taste, She brought him a whole selection of things, all spread out on the newspaper. There were old half-rotten vegetables, bones from the evening meal covered in white sauce that had gone hard, a few raisins and almonds, some cheese that Gregor had declared inedible 2 days ago, a dry roll, and some bread spread with butter and salt. As well as all that, she had poured some water into a dish, which had been permanently set aside for Gregor's use, and placed it beside them. Then, out of consideration for Gregor's feelings, as she knew he would not eat in front of her, she hurried out again and even turned the key in the lock so that Gregor would know he could make things uncomfortable for himself as he liked. Gregor's little legs whirred. At last, he could eat. What's more, his injuries must have completely healed, as he found no difficulty in moving. This amazed him, as much more than a month earlier he cut his finger slightly with a knife, and thought of how his finger still hurt the day before yesterday. Am I less sensitive now than I used to be then? He thought, and was already sucking greedily at the cheese, which had immediately, almost compellingly, attracted him more than any other foods on the newspaper. He's a cheese sucker. Gregor's a cheese sucker now. Inedible cheese sucker. Quickly, one after another, his eyes watering with pleasure, he consumed the cheese, the vegetables, and the sauce. The fresh foods, on the other hand, he didn't like at all, and he even dragged the things he didn't want to eat a little away from them because he couldn't stand the smell. Long after he had finished eating and lay lethargic in the same place, he's like sleeping now. His sister slowly turned the key, and the lock as a sign to him that he could withdraw. He was immediately startled, and though he had been half asleep, he hurried back under the couch. But he needed great self-control to stay there for a short time that his sister was in the room, as eating so much had rounded out his little body, and he could hardly breathe in such a narrow place. You don't blame him for the cheese? Yeah, this is Metamorphosis. Look at the title, JJ. It's moldy cheese, Salty. Do you like moldy cheese? Are you a cheese sucker? Should I know more? This is scary. Half suffocating. Cheese is yummy. Yeah, the titles are a thing. You're a cheese sucker? What? I'm concerned. I do a concern. He watched with bulging eyes as his sister unselfconsciously took a broom and swept up the leftovers, mixing them in with the food he had not even touched at all, as if it could not be used anymore. She quickly dropped it all into a bin, closed it with its wooden lid, and carried everything out. She'd hardly turned her back before Gregor had came out again under the couch and stretched himself. This is how Gregor received his food each day now. Once in the morning while his parents and the maid were still asleep, and the second time after everyone had eaten their meal at midday. His parents would sleep for a little while then as well, and Gregor's sister would send the maid away on some errand. Gregor's father and mother certainly did not want him to starve either, but perhaps it would have been more than they could stand to have any more experience of his feeding than being told about it. And perhaps his sister wanted to spare them what distress she could, as they were indeed suffering enough. So this is the part that gets me about the parents here. The parents flipped out. Now don't get me wrong. If I saw my kid turned into a bug, I got that. I would like to take my cheese from under the couch. Wow. You're a under the couch cheese sucker? You just want to lay under the couch and suck cheese. Is this what you're saying? Is it that bad? That's how much you want to be left alone? Don't judge me. I'm an under the couch cheese sucker. This is strange, man. My life has gone strange. It sounds like a simple life. That's fair. The parents have just long They're just trying to ignore this shit. You know? They're just trying to ignore that their son is a cockroach, essentially. From what I can gather, he seems rather cockroachy. He's cockroachified. It is simple. Thank you. All right. Well, Rathmore approves of your under-the-couch cheese-sucking life. What kind of cheese, Salty, would you like? Because I think it would be easier to suck easy cheese. You know, like the cheese in a can. Yeah, everyone just goes along and ignores it, right? Like except for his sister, who's just kind of like trying to make it okay. Your face is easy cheese. Any cheese, you would suck all cheeses under couch. No canned cheese. All right, so it's not any cheese. It's solid cheese. I don't know. It was impossible. That's not real cheese. Okay, so you're not considered. Is canned cheese really cheese? Well, when you look on the side of canned cheese, it says cheese food. It says cheese food. I think it's what cheese eats. Is cheese food. And then it digests it and turns it into real cheese. It's cheese food. It's not cheese food. It says it on the side of the can, cheese food. I'm just saying. Cheese whiz. No whiz. That's corporate speak for cheese flavored, not cheese. Okay. Okay. All right. It was impossible for Gregor to find out what they had told the doctor and locksmith that first morning to get them out of the flat. As nobody could understand him. Nobody, not even his sister, thought that he could understand them. So he had to be content to hear his sister's sighs and appeals to the saints when she moved about his room. It was only later, when she'd become a little more used to everything, there was, of course, no question of her becoming fully used to the situation, that Gregor would sometimes catch a friendly comment, or at least a comment that could be construed as friendly. "He's enjoyed his dinner today," she might say when she had diligently cleared all the food left for him. Or if he left most of it, which slowly became more and more frequent, she would often say, "Now everything's just been left there again." The whiz goes on a Philly cheese. No, you do not put cheese whiz on Philly cheese. That's nasty. No, you do not. That is a no, sir. That is a no, sir. Bad JJ. Bad JJ. Salty, what do you think? Do you put cheese whiz on a Philly cheese? Apparently, Salty is a cheese. If you take it any other way, they stab you in the face. No shit. They just stab you right in the face. So, whiz or no whiz? Okay, so I'm asking you, Salty, whiz on... That's what they ask you. Whiz or no whiz? That's nasty. I don't want anybody to ask me if they're going to whiz on my sandwich. Make a poll. All right. Got to make a poll. Poll. Start. All right. Poll is up. Tell says no cheese whiz on the Philly cheesesteak. He wants to know what's wrong with you. See, I agree with Tell. Tell and I are in agreement here. I'll take you to Philly, Dio. You'll get whiz. Whew. I do a concern, but I'll go to Philly with you. Guy said whiz or cheddar. The customer said cheddar. The guy in line behind him said, "You motherfucker," and then stabbed him. Is that a true story, JJ? V. Provolone. Yes, provolone. Yes, agreed. No shit, that's a true story. Just shanked him for no whiz. I don't want anybody whizzing on my sandwich, is all I'm saying. And I said, I'm done with Philly now. All right. Back to the story here. I got 3 words for you, Dia. Oh, that's the different 3 words that I normally get. Okay. I could do Velveeta on it, but not whiz. I could do Velveeta on there. What do you think, Salty? Can we do Velveeta instead of whiz? Or do I gotta have whiz? I don't think I want whiz. Now, Philly Whiz is essentially Velveeta. Oh, okay. And not in a can. Okay. Tell says no Velveeta either. Okay. Some strong, you must have whiz. Okay, I can do okay, I'll do whiz. It's in a glass jar. Okay, all right, I'm seeing where this is coming from. Nerd Holla! What's going on, nerd? Someone give Nerd Holla a shout out, please. I have arrived. Snugs has arrived. Nerd Holla, please take the poll. We're asking if you want whiz, cheese whiz. It needs the @ symbol on this one, JJ. I'm not so high dollar like that. Try it, you'll like it. Everywhere I've been, wheeze is meant in a spray can. Yes, that's where I meant too. Yeah, okay, I was used to like, and that shit's just nasty. Okay, it's kind of spreadable on there. It's kind of like, okay. All right, I'll do that. JJ don't have no sword here. Yeah, I'm not giving JJ a sword. I'm not doing it. Nope. Not doing it. Not doing it. Definitely, you want it definitely from a spray. It has to be from a spray can? Salty. Let's be reasonable here, baby. 75% complete to the Drunken Shales Challenge. We only got a couple more grand. I think only 1,000 grand. 1,000 grand. Wow. Only a grand more to go. I'm not giving you one either, nerd. No, I have seen your activity and what you treat little girls like. It's not right. It is not right. All right. I'm going to have to trust you, baby. Although Gregor wasn't able to hear any news directly. Yeah, no, I'm not trusting you, nerd. No, you are a bad influence on small children. Although Gregor wasn't able to hear any news directly, he did listen to much of what was being said in the next rooms. Whenever he heard anyone speaking, he would scurry straight to the appropriate door and press his whole body against it. There was seldom any conversation, especially at first, that was not about him in some way, even if only in secret. For 2 whole days, all the talk at mealtime was about what they should do now. But even between meals, they spoke about the same subject, and there were always at least 2 members of the family at home. Nobody wanted to be at home by themselves, and that was out of the question to leave the flat entirely empty. And on the first day, the maid had fallen to her knees and begged Gregor's mother to let her go without delay. It was not very clear how she knew what happened, but she left within a quarter of an hour, tearfully thanking Gregor's mother for her dismissal as if she had done her an enormous service. She even swore emphatically not to tell, I'm not on the right page here, come on, man, anyone the slightest about what had happened, even though no one had asked that of her. Now, Gregor's sister had also had to help his mother with the cooking, although that was not so much of a bother as no one ate very much. Gregor often heard how one of them would unsuccessfully urge the other to eat and receive no more answer than, "No thanks, I've had enough," or something similar. No one drank very much either. His sister would sometimes ask his father whether he would like a beer, hoping for the chance to go fetch it herself. And when his father said nothing, she would add, so that he would not feel selfish, and she would send the housekeeper for it. But then his father would close the matter with a big loud "no," and no more else could be said. What did I miss here? This guy took out a glass jar and then poured it into the hot pot thingy and then ladled it into the sandwich. Yeah, exactly. This is not spray cheese. And everyone that got provolone or cheddar got some unkind words from the crowd. One guy just decided to be stabby. Okay. So when in Philadelphia, do not get whiz, or you're fitting to get shanked up in this dump. Even before the first day had come to an end, his father had explained to Gregor's mother what their finances and prospects were. Now and then he stood up from the table and took some receipt or document from the little cash box that he had saved from his business when it collapsed 5 years earlier. Gregor heard how he opened the complicated lock and then closed it again after he had taken some item he wanted. When he had heard his father say that there was at first some good news that Gregor had heard he had been incarcerated in his room. He had thought that nothing at all had remained of his father's business. At least, he had never told him anything different, and Gregor had never asked about him anyway. Their business misfortune had reduced the family to a state of total despair, and Gregor's only concern at that time had been to arrange things so they could all forget about it as quickly as possible. So then he started working especially hard, with fiery vigor that raised him from junior salesman to a traveling representative almost overnight, bringing with it the chance to earn money in quite different ways. Gregor converted his success at work straight into cash that he could lay on the table at home for his benefits astonished and delighted his family. They had been good times, and they had never come again, at least not with the same splendor, even though Gregor's had later earned so much that he was in position to bear the costs of the whole family, and did bear them. They had even gotten used to it, both Gregor and the family. They took money with gratitude, and he was glad to provide it, although there was no longer much warm affection given in return. Gregor only remained close to his sister now. Unlike him, she was very fond of music and was a gifted and expressive violinist. It was his secret plan to send her to the conservatory next year, even though it would cause great expense that would have to be made up for in some way or another. During Gregor's short periods in town, conversations with his sister would often turn to the conservatory, but it was only ever mentioned as a lovely dream that could never be realized. Their parents did not like to hear this innocent talk, but Gregor thought about it quite hard and decided he would let them know what he planned with a grand announcement of it on Christmas Day. That was the sort of totally pointless thing that went through his mind in his present state. Pressed upright against the door and listening, there were times that when he would simply become too tired to continue listen, when his head would fall wearily against the door and he would pull it up again with a start, and even the slightest noise had cause to be heard. "What's he doing now?" They'd all go silent. "What's he doing now?" his father would say, after a while, clearly having gone over to the door, and only then he would be interrupted and conversation slowly be taken up again. The conservatory. What a dream. When explaining things, his father repeated himself several times, partly because it was a long time since he had occupied these matters with himself, and partly because Gregor's mother did not understand everything the first time. From these repeated explanations, Gregor learned, to his pleasure, that despite all their misfortune, there was still some money available from the old days. It was not a lot, but it had not been touched in the meantime, and some interest had accumulated. Besides that, they had not used up all the money that Gregor had been bringing home every month, keeping only a little for himself. So that too had been accumulating. Behind the door, Gregor nodded with enthusiasm and his pleasure at this unexpected thrift and caution. He could not have actually used their surplus money to reduce father's debt to his boss, and the day when he could have freed himself from that job would have come much closer, but now it would certainly be better the way his father had done things. That's kind of crazy, right? He's working all this and is just in debt to his this boss, and his father is still kind of saving money. So hold on, my son just came home. I'm going to be right back. Let me put you guys on the pause screen, and I'll be right back. Sorry, I had to mute my mic when I went to the... You know what I need to do? I don't know if I need the mic on the pause screen or not, but we'll leave it for now. All right, sorry. I needed to unmute. I find it interesting that they didn't tell him right away. They didn't tell him at all. Yeah. Yeah, V. This money, however, was certainly not enough to enable the family to live off the interest. It was enough to maintain them for perhaps 1 or 2 years, no more. So they had 2 years worth of money, and he was talking about how he needed to pay it off in like 6 years. So it would have taken 2 years off of their debt. Yeah, Gregor's kind of getting the shaft by the family here. But he was really happy to provide for them. That's to say, it was money that should not really be touched but set aside for emergencies. Money to live on had to be earned. His father was healthy but old and lacking in self-confidence. During the 5 years that he had not been working, the first holiday in life had been full of strain and no success. He'd put on a lot of weight and become very slow and clumsy. Would Gregor's elderly mother now have to go out and earn money? She suffered from asthma, and it was a strain for her just to move about the home. Every other day would be spent struggling for breath on the sofa beside the open window. Would his sister have to go out and earn money? She was still a child of 17. Her life up until then had been very enviable. It consisted of wearing nice clothes, sleeping late, helping out in the business, joining in with a few modest pleasures, but most of all playing the violin. Whenever they began to talk in need of money, Gregor would always be the first let go of the door and then throw himself into the cool leather sofa next to it, as he became quite hot with shame and regret. So he worked all these years, and anytime they mentioned money, it still ate at him to produce. He would often lie there the whole night through, not sleeping a wink, but scratching at the leather for hours on end. He might go to all the effort pushing a chair to the window, climbing up to the sill, propped up on the chair, leaning on the window to stare out of it. He used to feel a great sense of freedom from doing this, but doing it now was obviously something more remembered than experienced, as what he actually saw in this way had become less distinct every day. Even though that were quite near, he used to curse the ever-present view of the hospital across the street, but now he couldn't see it at all. And if he had not known that he lived in Charlottenstrasse, which is a quiet street despite being in the middle of the city, he would have thought that he was looking out the window at a barren waste where the gray sky and gray earth had mingled inseparably. His observant sister only needed to notice the chair twice before she would have always pushed it back in that same position by the window after she had tidied up the room, and even left the inner pane of the window open from then on. If Gregor had only been able to speak to his sister and thank her for all she had done to him she had to do for him, it would have been easier for him to bear, but as it was, it caused him pain. His sister naturally tried as far as possible to pretend there was nothing burdensome about it, and the longer it went on, of course, the better she was able to do so. But as time went by, Gregor was also able to see through it all so much better. It had even become very unpleasant for him now whenever she entered the room. No sooner had she come in than she would quickly close the door as a precaution so that no one would have to suffer the view into Gregor's room. Then she would go straight to the window, pull it hurriedly open as if she were suffocating. Even if it was cold, she would stay at the window breathing deep for a little while. She would alarm Gregor twice a day and running about and the noise making. He would stay under the couch shivering the whole while, knowing full well that she would have certainly liked to spare him this ordeal. But it was impossible for her to be in the same room with him without the windows closed. I really love this, and I remember when I was listening to this, it's a brilliant way, I think this is what's going on. It's a brilliant way for Kafka to explain that it stunk terribly in that room. But Gregor, of course, doesn't know it, right? So she has to rush over to the window and gulp in the air, but Gregor has no clue why she's doing that. One day after a month About a month after Gregor's transformation, when his sister no longer had any particular reason to be shocked at his appearance, she came into the room a little earlier than usual and found him still staring out the window, motionless, just where he would been, and just where he would be most horrible. In itself, his sister not coming to the room would have been no surprise for Gregor, as it would have been difficult for her to immediately open the window while he was still there. Not only did she not come in, she went straight back and closed the door behind her. A stranger would have thought he threatened her and tried to bite her. Gregor went straight to hide himself under the couch, of course, but he had to wait until midday before his sister came back, and she seemed much more uneasy than usual. It made him realize that she still found his appearance unbearable, and she would continue to do so. She probably even had to overcome the urge to flee when she saw the little bit of him that protruded under the couch. You feel like he did know, which makes it sadder. One day, in order to spare her even this sight, he spent hours carrying the bedsheet over to the couch and on his back and arranged it so that it was completely covered. His sister was not able to see him even if she bent down. If she did not think the sheet necessary, all she had to do was take it off again, as it was clear enough that it was no pleasure for Gregor to cut himself off so completely. She left the sheet where it was. Gregor even thought that he glimpsed a look of gratitude one time when he carefully looked out from under the sheet to see how his sister liked the new arrangement. For the first 14 days, yeah, he is trying to spare her all the ugliness. For the first 14 days, Gregor's parents could not bring themselves to come into the room to see him. He would often hear them say how they appreciated all his new work his sister was doing, though, before they had seen her as a girl that was somewhat useless and frequently been annoyed with her. But now the two of them, father and mother, would both often wait outside the door of Gregor's room while his sister tidied up in there. And as soon as she went out again, she would have to tell them exactly how everything looked, what Gregor had eaten, how he had behaved this time, and whether perhaps any slight improvement could be seen. His mother also wanted to go in and visit Gregor relatively soon, but his father and sister at first persuaded her against it. Gregor listened very closely to all this and approved fully. Later, though, she had to be held back by force, which made her call out, "Let me go in and see Gregor. He is my unfortunate son. Can't you understand I have to see him?" And Gregor would think to himself that maybe it would be better if his mother came in. Not every day, of course, but maybe one day a week. Perhaps she could understand everything as much better than his sister, who, for all her courage, was still a child after all. And she really might not have been an adult's appreciation of the burdensome job that she had taken on. Gregor's wish to see his mother was soon realized, out of consideration for his parents. Gregor wanted to avoid being seen at the window during the day. The few square meters of the floor did not give him much room to crawl about. It was hard to just lie quietly throughout the night. His food soon stopped giving him any pleasure at all, and so to entertain himself, he got into the habit of crawling up and down the walls and the ceiling. He was especially fond of hanging from the ceiling, which was quite different from laying on the floor. He could breathe more freely. His body had a light swing to it, and up there he relaxed and was almost happy. It might happen that he would surprise even himself by letting go of the ceiling and landing on the floor with a crash. But now, of course, he had far better control of his body than before, and even with a great fall, as he knew, it would cause him no damage. Very soon his sister noticed Gregor's new way of entertaining himself. He had, after all, left all traces of the adhesive from his feet as he crawled about, and it got into her head to make it as easy as possible for him by removing the furniture that got in his way, especially the chest of drawers and the desk. Now, this was not something she could do by herself. She did not dare to ask help of her father. The 16-year-old maid had carried on bravely since the cook had left, but she certainly would not have helped in all this. She had even asked to be allowed to keep the kitchen locked at times and never had to go open the door unless it was especially important. So his sister had no choice but to choose some time when Gregor's father was not there and fetch his mother to help her. As she approached the room, Gregor could hear his mother express her joy. But once at the door, she went silent. First, of course, his sister came in and looked around to see everything in the room was all right, and only then did she let her mother enter. Gregor had hurriedly pulled the sheet down over the couch and put more folds into it so that everything really looked as if they had just been thrown down by chance. Gregor also refrained this time from spying out from under the sheet. He gave up the chance to see his mother until later and was simply glad that she had come. "You can come in. He can't be seen," said his sister, obviously leading her by the hand. The old chest of drawers was too heavy for a pair of feeble women to be heaving about, but as Gregor listened as they pushed it from its place, his sister was always taking the heaviest part of the work for herself and ignoring her mother's warnings that she would strain herself. This lasted for a very long time. After laboring at it for 15 minutes or so, his mother said it would be better to leave the chest where it was. For one thing, it was too heavy for them to get the job finished before Gregor's father got home, and leaving it in the middle of the room would surely be getting in the way even more. And for another thing, she wasn't even sure that taking the furniture away would be really any help to him. She thought just the opposite, and the slight sight of the bare walls saddened her to her heart. And why wouldn't Gregor feel the same about it? He'd been used to this furniture in the room for so long, it would make him feel abandoned to be in an empty room like that. Then quietly, almost whispering as if wanting Gregor, whose whereabouts she did not know, to even hear even her tone of voice, and she was convinced that he did not understand her words anyway. She added, "And by taking away the furniture, won't it seem like we're showing that we've given up on all hope of improvement? That we're abandoning him to cope for himself? I think it best to leave the room exactly the way it was before, so that when Gregor comes back to us again, he'll find everything unchanged and he'll be able to forget the time in between all the easier." Hearing these words from his mother made Gregor realize that the lack of any human communication, along with the monotonous life led by the family during these 2 months, must have made him confused. He could think of no other way of explaining to himself why he seriously wanted his room emptied out. He had really wanted to transform his room into a cave, a warm room fitted with nice furniture that he inherited? Had he really wanted to transform his room into a cave, a warm room fitted out with a nice furniture he inherited? That would have let him crawl around unimpeded in any direction. But it would also let him quickly forget his past when he had still been human. He had become very close to forgetting. It had only been the voice of his mother, unheard for so long, that had shaken him out of it. Nothing should be removed. Everything had to stay. He could not do without the good influence that the furniture had on his condition. And if the furniture had made it difficult for him to crawl around mindlessly, that was not a great loss. Maybe even an advantage. Is this a metaphor for someone severely injured or more in an accident? They lose their selflessness when they become their ailment? I don't know. I know that some have, wondered if it wasn't about handicapped. I don't know. His sister, unfortunately, did not agree. She had been used to the idea, not without reason, that she had taken to be Gregor's spokesperson, and his parents about the things that had concerned him. To his parents about the things that had concerned him. This meant that his mother's advice now was sufficient reason for her to insist on removing not only the chest of drawers and the desk, and she had thought at first, but the furniture apart from the all-important couch. But all the furniture important from the all-important couch. It was more than childish perversity, of course, or the unexpected confidence she had recently acquired that made her insist. She had indeed noticed that Gregor needed a lot more room to crawl about in, whereas the furniture, as far as anyone could see, was no use to him at all. Girls of that age, though, do become enthusiastic about things and feel they must get their way whenever they can. Perhaps this was what tempted Greta to make Gregor's situation seem more shocking than it was, that she could do even more for him. Greta would probably be the only one who would dare enter a room dominated by Gregor crawling about the bare walls by himself. So she refused to let her mother dissuade her. Gregor's mother was already looked uneasy in this room. She soon stopped speaking and helped Gregor's sister get the chest of drawers out with what strength she had. The chest of drawers was something Gregor could do without if he had to, but the writing desk had to stay. Hardly did the two women push the chest of drawers groaning out of the room that Gregor poked his head out from under the couch to see what he could do about it. This meant he had to be as careful and considerate as he could, but unfortunately it was his mother who came back first while Greta was in the next room, who had her arms around the chest, pushing and pulling it from one side by herself without, of course, moving it an inch. His mother was not used to the sight of Gregor. He might have made her ill, so Gregor hurried backwards as far to the end of the couch. In his startlement, though, he was not able to prevent the sheet at the front from moving a little, and it was enough to attract his mother's attention. She stood very still and remained there for a moment, then went out to get Greta. Gregor had kept trying to assure himself that nothing unusual was happening, and it was just a few pieces of furniture being moved after all. But he soon had to admit that the women going to and fro... Hey! Looks like we're now gonna have some drinking streams coming up. I'm trying to think, maybe we can do it this week. Maybe we can do it Thursday. We'll see. Maybe tomorrow. No, I got Gloomhaven tomorrow. Maybe Thursday. Gregor kept trying to assure himself that nothing unusual was happening. It was just a few pieces of furniture being moved after all. But he soon had to admit that the women going to and fro with their little calls to each other, the scraping of furniture on the wall, of furniture on the floor, all these things made him feel as if he were being assailed from all sides. With his head and legs pulled in against him and his body pressed to the floor, he was forced to admit to himself that he could not stand all of this much longer. They were emptying his room out, taking away everything that was dear to him. They had already taken out the chest containing his fret saw and other tools. Now they threatened to remove the writing desk with its place clearly worn in the floor. Posture check and stretch. Oh, my neck. Oops, I messed up my pillow here. I'll have to fix it later. That was much better. Thank you, Callie. He really could not wait. Oh, let me back up. The desk where he'd done his homework as his business trainee at high school, even while he had been at infant school. He really could not wait any longer to see if the two women's intentions were good. He had nearly forgotten that they were there anyway. As they were now too tired to say anything while they worked, he could only hear their feet as they stepped heavily on the floor. So while the women were linked against the desk in another room, catching their breath, he sallied out, changed directions 4 times, not knowing what he should say before his attention suddenly caught by the picture on the wall, which was already denuded of everything else that had been on it, of a lady dressed in the copious fur. He hurried up onto the picture and pressed himself against the glass. He held himself firmly and it felt good on his hot belly. This picture, at least, now totally covered by Gregor, would certainly be taken away by no one. He turned his head to face the door to the living room and could watch the women when they entered. They had not allowed themselves a long rest and came back quite soon. Yeah, I know I was slightly hunched. Apologize. They had not allowed themselves a very long rest and came back quite soon. Greta had put her arm around her mother and was nearly carrying her. What should we take now then? Said Greta and looked around. Her eyes met those of Gregor on the wall. Perhaps only because her mother was there, she remained calm, bent her face to her so that she would not round, and said, albeit hurriedly, "Come on, let's go back in the living room for a while." Gregor could see that what Greta had in mind. She wanted to take her mother somewhere safe and then chase him down from the wall. Well, she should certainly try it. He sat unyielding on the picture. He would rather jump at Greta's face. But Greta's words had made his mother quite worried. She stepped to one side, saw the enormous brown patch against the flowers of the wallpaper. Before it was even realized it was Gregor, she screamed, "Oh God, oh God!" Arms outstretched, she fell onto the couch as if she had given up everything and stayed there immobile. "Gregor!" shouted his sister, glowering at him and shaking her fist. That was the first word she had spoken to him directly since his transformation. She ran into the other room to fetch some kind of smelling salts and to bring her mother out of the faint. Gregor wanted to help too. He could save his picture later, although he was stuck fast to the glass and had to pull himself off by force. Then he too ran into the next room to see if he could advise his sister like in the old days. But he stood to stand behind her doing nothing. She was looking into various bottles. He startled her when she turned around and a bottle fell to the ground and broke. A splinter cut Gregor's face. Some kind of caustic medicine splashed all over him now Without delaying any longer, Greta took hold of all the bottles she could and ran with them to her mother. She slammed the door shut with her foot. So now Gregor was shut out from his mother, who, because of him, might be near to death. He could not hold open the door, and if he did, he could not chase his sister away. And she had to stay there with his mother. There was nothing for him to do but wait. And oppressed with anxiety and self-reproach, he began to crawl about. He crawled over everything, the walls, the furniture, the ceiling, and finally in his confusion, as the whole room began to spin around him, he fell down in the middle of the dinner table. We are 2 hours in, and I think that is where we will leave it for tonight. We're halfway through, so we will finish up this next Tuesday. Next Tuesday at 8 o'clock, come back to see what the rest is. I will upload this as soon as possible to YouTube so that you can watch it if you need to ever, see it again. I will also give a revision of it when we come back on Tuesday. Let's see who we can raid. Who is on now? Anybody got any suggestions? Oh, we've got Liching Hour. Nerdhologist started up. Felicia Day is on, playing Dredge. My friend Fierce Kittens is on. Any suggestions from anyone? I'm taking suggestions. Raid. We usually raid Lich. Oh, it's Viva La Dungeon night, though. That's true. Nerdhala's got D&D going. I'm not seeing any suggestions. So let's read the Liching Hour. Thank you all for coming tonight. It's good to see you all. It's good to see you, Salty. I'll text you in just a minute here. And I will see you next Tuesday for the finale, the exciting finale of Franz Kafka's Metamorphosis. Let us see what happens to Gregor and his sort of change that's going through his life. See you all next Tuesday. Be good to each other. The raid has been started. Please join over. When you get to the Liching Hour, please follow. Follows are free, and they truly do help us, wee little streamers out there. See you all next week. Like I say, be good to each other.